to me, it was a little bit of explaining certain things like the research that I haven't been doing, the writing the publishing that hasn't been happening. I've got a million great ideas. I've got 400 outlines that I've put together. I've done a ton of research, but just nothing has come together. And so part of it was to tell him to even hold me accountable. It's like, I think I've got the tools to be more productive. I think that I'm getting closer to getting this under control, that I will be able to contribute more to the academy from our department, from our school.
ADHD Rewired, episode 87. This is the show designed to help those of us who have really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. My name is Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, coach, and consultant. We know that starting can be the hardest part, so let's get started. But first, let me thank our sponsors. Before we get started with today's episode, I do want to let you know that my audio on this interview might sound a little funny. I got a new audio piece of equipment, and I don't think I had the settings correctly, so my S's are kind of de-essed. It's actually the name of a thing called the de-esser. And so I got this gate compressor. You probably don't care about that, but I do want to let you know that if it doesn't sound the way it usually does, I am aware of it, and we'll hopefully have that sound resolved really soon. There might be another episode next week where you hear the same kind of issue, but I am aware of it, and that's all the apologizing I'm going to do for now. So enjoy the episode. I know how much you like to plan ahead. It was a joke. If you're interested in the ADHD Rewired Winter Coaching Group, you can let me know at coachingrewired.com. That's coachingrewired.com. We begin in January. Today's podcast is brought to you by audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial. Go to audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired. Check show notes for link. Welcome to another episode of ADHD Rewired. We are doing another live blab. So this episode is going to be another one where we're going to involve the community, but at the end, what people are going to get to experience, whether you are listening on iTunes or Stitcher or SoundCloud, or you are here live in the live blab, we're going to have a conversation, and then towards the end, we are going to open it up for Q&A. So my guest today is Kent Kersey. Now, I hope I'm saying that name right, because I probably messed it up. Judging by the nod, it's close, but not quite.
Yeah, it's like Jersey with a K. So
okay, and I think at least once a day I'm telling someone it's Tivers, not Tivers. So I totally get it. So
yeah,
Kent
it's all good.
Kersey,
Yes.
Kersey.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Kent Kersey. I'm just going to let you kind of introduce yourself, kind of what you do and what's your relationship with ADHD.
Yeah, so my name is Kent Kersey. I actually teach theology, philosophy, history type classes at a small Christian college in Salem, Oregon. Been here about 13 years and absolutely love it. And my association with ADD is I was just recently diagnosed, but I suspected about 10 years ago that that I had these tendencies. Someone close to me was diagnosed about 10 years ago. And to me, the whole ADD thing was, I just figured that's something kids get who have problems in school. That's really all I knew. And as I started to read more about it, I realized this is me. This is describing me down to a T. And so I actually went to my doctor, general practitioner, asked her about it. She was a newer doctor, and I don't think she really thought it was a real thing. And she talked me out of it, said, don't worry about it. You're successful. You're fine. And it wasn't until just this last summer that I was talking to my doctor about something else, and it just came to mind. It's like, I do have this other thing. And he encouraged me to actually go get tested. I was tested. And the guy who did the testing says, man, you're way off the charts. I don't know how you made it this far. And so been more intentional about treatments and dealing with it really over the last 2 or 3 months, and have noticed some big differences.
So you're really, really new to this diagnosis.
Yeah, yeah. And
I think it is so cool when someone who wants to come onto this podcast and they're so new to it. And I think that speaks of volumes to this. We feel like we've been living this almost mystery of a lie, and not even a lie, but just this unknown part of our life. And we're so eager to share, because when we can share this experience with others, especially when you, I think, been late diagnosed, there's a very cathartic kind of process to that.
yeah.
So do you remember what it was like for you when you first started reading about something? Like, do you remember what it was you were reading and kind of what was going on during that time for you?
Yeah, it was actually, so I'm reading about it, and I realized that this described me, distractions. One of the things was even like when you're driving, do you get frustrated when you're driving? And yes, everybody else out there is an idiot except me when I'm driving. They should just be off the road. And I realized, man, why am I so upset when I'm driving? And that was one of the things that was talking about, that this is a symptom. Mm-hmm. And I realized that, and one of the things that questioned, because I actually have a PhD, been fairly successful academically, professionally, and remember thinking, well, this can't be me, because it's people with problems. It's people who don't get through school very well. And talked to a doctor at that time, and this doctor he had ADD. And all of a sudden, light bulbs went off. I was like, oh, okay. I guess it is possible to have this and still be fairly successful, professionally. And so I realized a lot of what was happening was that I was compensating a lot and hadn't realized it. And there actually were positives. A lot of creativity is, I used a lot of creativity in my job, and realized that's probably one of the positive aspects of what's going on.
What are some ways that you use creativity in your job?
Yeah, actually, when I was hired here when I came after I finished my work at grad school, and I had 2 half-time jobs. And as I think back in retrospect, that's probably an ADD thing. You're just jumping around from one job to the other. And I was actually campus pastor and on faculty, and so I oversaw chapel, things like that. And so that was constant. Meant I was preparing messages, I was planning, I was working with students. And so just a lot of things. And when you work with students, you want to be creative. You want to figure out ways to tell the same story in a more creative way. And as I look back on that, I realized that I was using creativity, that if I didn't have this condition, maybe I wouldn't have had it at that level.
Yeah, and I think too, it's funny when you say you're doing all these different things. I think about myself, my training is as a social worker. And, when someone asks me what I do, that's always a long-winded answer. It's like, I'm a social worker. I'm a coach. I'm a podcaster. I'm a speaker. I'm a, social media, hobbyist. I play frisbee golf, it's
I'm a dad. I'm a husband.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's so many things, and it's, it's like what is exciting us in that moment is what we do. And, I have no idea what I'll be doing in 10 years from now. When you think about that question about what do you think you'll be doing in 10 years from now, what kind of comes to your mind?
Yeah, actually, one of the things that's happened since I've started treatment in a couple different ways is that I actually see myself as an academic. I mean, that's what I am. I'm now a professor, and now I have hope that 10 years from now, I will have written a couple books and been published and do more speaking. Whereas even 3 or 4 months ago, I had a lot of great ideas about what I'd like to do. And really, for academic institutions, they want you to be doing those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. But, I had a million great ideas of what I would want to do. But now I actually feel like I have the tools to get a lot of that stuff done.
What were some of those great ideas, if you want to share it? And that this is like, I can't release this yet.
No, well, a couple things that I'm interested. I love culture, pop culture, movies, those sort of things. And in fact, right now I teach a class called Christianity and Contemporary Culture, and I help the students see how, as believers, we can actually watch films, listen to music, watch TV shows, and actually can get some fairly deep ideas from them. A couple weeks ago, we looked at the album by the Beach Boys, Pet Sounds, and realized that's actually an amazing narrative about American culture and romance and marriage, all these sorts of things. We just recently, we looked at The Godfather, things like that. And so as I watch movies and popular culture, I always have these ideas of what I'd like to do with that. And, maybe that's publishing, maybe that's doing more speaking on these things. But that's one of the things that really interests me, is being able to link, faith to the real world that people are living in, especially for our students.
So it's practical, it's useful. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so, a lot of times you are watching something and go, wow, it's a great idea. And it's just gone. Again, those ideas when you.
I've never had that happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the last 30
what was
minutes?
I just talking about? I remember. Yeah. Yeah. And now I feel, and especially I think because of some medications I'm taking, is that I can control those thoughts. I think we talked before I took the medications, I realized my thoughts were a room full of 3-year-olds screaming for attention. And now they actually will sit and wait, and I can actually get work done. I can say, okay, that's a good thought. Let me write that down and think of it later. And so I feel a lot more confident that I can actually get some productivity done.
And I remember you using that analogy, and I mentioned to you that one of my past guests, Ryan McRae, who I
went back and listened,
who I actually spoke to today, and because he's got some cool stuff coming out, and at the time when I asked you about it, you had not listened to that episode, wasn't that right?
Yeah.
And it's so funny how we have these, you can have never meet someone and have this like the same analogy in your head. I think it really exemplifies the nature of this disorder of ADHD, and how powerful metaphors and stories are into understanding this. Beyond the list of 18 symptoms of within ADHD, I think when we can understand the stories of it, it really makes it make a lot more sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, and another thing I've been noticing, I think this sort of relates, but the cool thing about this podcast is you can just jump all over the place, right? One thing I've noticed with especially students, because I started 13 years ago here, I think that's what I said. And that was before Facebook and the internet really, nobody really had the internet at all. It's back in the old days, you walk uphill to school in the snow type stuff.
Both ways.
And now there's so much distraction out there that I think people who don't even really have ADD, there are so many symptoms out there in the general public because there's so much to distract us, right? And I think maybe understanding those stories can even help us relate to people who are just being distracted by life, and so many things out there that are screaming for our attention.
And I think that too, it's a really interesting kind of conversational piece talking about, is the digital, age that we're living in, is it causing ADHD? And let me be real clear, no.
Yeah.
It exacerbates people who have ADHD, and it does also create ADHD-like symptoms in people, but that is different than actually having ADHD, because ADHD is a neurobiological developmental delay versus something that, may, what I'll be interested to see too, and I don't think we're there yet, is looking at studies of, what we would call healthy control studies. And so all the normal people out there, and looking at their kind of people who have experienced long-term kind of internet use and are on social media a lot, and who are maybe currently struggling with like net-based addictions or video game addictions and things where they're really having a hard time kind of with that balance, and compare some of the functional brain studies between the ADHD brain and the brain of someone who's just on this digital media all the time, and their attention span is going from one thing to the other every 3 seconds. I think it's something of interest, but I don't think we have the comparison studies yet to show that. But we do know, I mean, it's interesting because we know that the more whatever we are doing or not doing, we are wiring or rewiring our brain. All of that being said, so I do think that we are changing brain networks by what we are doing. But
so do you think that like, you take a college student today, and if you map his brain, I'm not sure how that works. Would it look differently from a student from 1975?
Well, Here's the thing with brain scans is that we know in group study that there are clear distinctions between ADHD and non-ADHD people. Okay. The diagnostic tools, the brain imaging that is currently available is not accurate enough to be able to, with any accurate measure, be able to identify from an individual basis. So that's where we use statistical analysis and say, okay, we're looking at the averages, the composite pictures, and then we see significant differences between it. But from the individual basis, there's too many false positives and vice versa. So I think we're going to be there in our lifetime where we will be able to identify things based on brain scan, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, because my suspicion is, the brains of the college student today is so different, because it used to be you'd have to remember the capital of Brazil or whatever, but now, you pull this guy out and 4 seconds later you have it, and so it seems like that has to somehow affect the way we think, right?
Yeah, I think we should set a timer. Hang on.
There you go.
What's the capital of Brazil?
Sao Paulo? Brasilia, that's it.
Right. So,
I don't remember.
So why do we have to remember exactly? And, I was talking to someone recently about this idea that we need to be in our school systems, move away from just focusing on facts. We need to be moving towards critical thinking and creativity, because that is where the economy is going. I think that's where it already is. And if we're not educating critical thinkers, we're just going to be left behind.
Yeah. And that, there's this, I think our understanding, especially like higher ed, is the model of like a dump truck, like you go somewhere and they just dump a bunch of information in there. And that's what it used to be. But now with the internet, I have all that information at my fingertips, and it could be a student walks into my class, let's see, a theology class, and I've got a certain amount of information in there because I have studied this, but a curious student who knows how to look things up the right way on Google is really smarter than me because he has at his fingertips more information. And so I think we need to, especially for higher ed, it needs to go from this model of collection, a bunch of stuff, to curation, where we are not so much dumping stuff in your truck, but we're like whitewater rafting guide or something. It's like we could go down the raft, say, hey, look at that.
That sounds so much more ADHD friendly too.
And see, I think that's why, the positive things is I think I've been forced to think this way just for myself. And it probably has come in line with the way I think especially higher ed is going in the future. It just has to. There's way too much information to try and be an expert on something, but we can guide people towards, as you're on your journey, look at that, check this out, and wisely use that information that is readily available. I think that's the key, is don't collect a bunch of information, but, be very wise about how you use that information. And I think that's the difference it's going to be in the future. Yeah.
So, if you mind sharing with us, what are some of the, you talked about some of the things that you like to do with your job as a professor. What are some of the challenges that you've faced as a professor with ADHD, and how have you been navigating those?
Yeah, the biggest issue for me is just grading. A paper, it's fine if there's one paper that a student writes and I read it and that's fine, I can move on. But when you have like 80 students doing the same project, right? Because there's sometimes you just have to, here's a book, you got to read it. You got to give me 2 pages of summary. That's just part of the thing. It's this important book, you have to summarize it. And, I can read 2 of those and I'm fine. But after the 3rd or 4th one, there are a million different things that my attention goes to or wants to go to. And so part of the way I do it, you just have to grind through it sometimes. Mm-hmm. You just have to just do it. And that's really hard. But sometimes I've found that if I redesign the assignment a little bit, give me 1 page of what you didn't like on it or something like that. And so every page is going to be a little bit differently. I did one assignment when I was teaching biblical literature is I had students do a first person paper. And that was, you have to pick a Bible character and write from their perspective what they learned. And those were great because they were all different and they were all really interesting. It was like creative writing. And that was awesome. I loved going through that. And I have students do, observations. And if they're all different, that's fine. But once they start all looking the same.
That sounds awful to me. Having to go through something that's all the same.
And, but part of my responsibility as a professor, they're paying for an education. They're paying for me to assess their work. And you just have to do it at some point.
For me though, Ken, that when I there's certain things that I swear you couldn't pay me enough to do, and you could tell me, look through these 100-page spreadsheet and try to find this anomaly in each page. You can, and I'll give you $1 million to do it. I was like, it's not going to happen. Like I'll
give you the money
get through
if I don't
3 pages, and I'll be like, okay, someone like poke my eyes out right now with a hot gouger because I can't do this. It would make me so, just the thought of it makes me uncomfortable. Yeah.
And that's, and it's interesting because after I started some medication, I was able to sit and just do the work. And I realized, oh my goodness, 40 minutes have gone and I just got a bunch of work done, or the Pomodoro method.
I think so good.
Yeah, it's amazing. It was amazing. Yeah. And the Pomodoro method, when you just have a timer there and, okay, I can do this for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever. And the timer's there and you see it. Okay, I can do it. And so when you combine those two things, like that method with, some medication that's helping regulate, it's pretty amazing. I have been able to just get so much more work done. So.
Ken, what we're going to do right now is we are going to take a quick break for the podcast listeners and to pay the bills and thank our sponsors and to let people know a little bit more about what's kind of going on here. I bought my plane ticket. My hotel room is booked. I'm registered for the conference. What's left? I have to finish our presentation. I have plenty of time. Wait, no, I don't. Okay, don't panic. I have most of it done. I just have to tweak a few things and completely rewrite my introductory story to reflect the latest insights that I've had that have been swimming around in my head. I'm going to get back to working my presentation in just a moment. In the meantime, if you haven't registered for the conference yet, it's November 12th through the 14th in New Orleans, the Big Easy. And look, I know some of you might be thinking, I can't afford this conference. It's $240 for the conference, and it's probably going to be at least a couple $100 for airfare, unless you drive, and then the hotel, although it could be cheaper if you split it with somebody. I think you can do that on the website. But either way, that's going to be like a couple $100, and it could all total up to $700 or $800 or maybe even more. But it's not like that supersonic gumball machine that you ordered last year on a whim, by the way, which I think was awesome. This is an investment. You could spend a year reading all the books that have been written by all the speakers who will be at this year's conference, or you can come see them present and talk to them, and who knows, maybe even have a drink with them. You could wait until the conference is over and buy the audio afterwards. But let's get real for a moment. What are the chances that you will actually get yourself to sit down and listen to this on your own? I mean, maybe you will, and if you do, great, because I would recommend it. The past audio for past conferences is also on the website, so I would check it out. But seriously, join me at the biggest tribal event for the ADHD community. Go to chad.org. That's CHADD.org. And find out if I finish my presentation in time. Oh man, I hope no one from the Chad Conference Planning Committee is listening to this. And if you are, I have it all under control. There's nothing to worry about. November 12th to the 14th. Don't wait. Go to chad.org. See you there. It's ADHD Awareness Month trivia time. What do Stephanie Sarkis, Ari Tuckman, Roberta Olivardia, Terry Matlin, Alan Brown, Rick Green, Melissa Orlov, and Elaine Taylor-Klaus all have in common? If you guessed that they've all been featured with me on this podcast, that's one right answer, but that's not the only one. They are also featured speakers at this year's ADHD Awareness Expo. This is an online free expo Other speakers include Sari Solden, Lori DePar, David Gwerk, David Noel, Casey Dixon, and others. 26 experts all in 1 week. And the best part is, it's free. And of course, you won't want to miss my session on productivity and vulnerability. My session is scheduled for Thursday, October 29th at 12 p.m. Central Time. There really is no reason you should not register for this right now. It's free. Go to ADHDexpo.com. That's ADHDexpo.com. And I'll see you there.
Audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired for your free download. Trial.com/ADHD Rewired. Trial.com/ADHD Rewired. Go to audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired for your free audiobook download.
All right, we are back with Kent Kersey, and I got your name right this time.
Yes, that's awesome.
All right.
Mr. Tivers. Yeah, that's really good.
So what we're going to talk about as we move through this conversation, because we're going to have some time for Q&A at the end. So I want to talk about kind of tips, strategies, and other maybe challenges that you've had and how you've worked around those. But I do, again, want to remind everybody that the CHAD International Conference on ADHD is coming up November 12th through the 14th. I will be a speaker there. And I think right now they have 70 plus speakers there. It's in New Orleans. If you have not ever been to an ADHD conference and you're like, I'm new to this whole ADHD thing, and you just want to like stand in front of the fire hose of information, come to the CHAD conference. All right. So Ken, you were recently diagnosed. You've recently started taking medication, and so you're a teacher. I'm just kind of recapping for those who have just joined us, or for those who are listening on the podcast. I forgot what we were talking about. Now, you did also tell me that you did recently share that you have ADHD with your boss.
Yeah. With work, I've talked to just a few people. Maybe October being Awareness Month, this will be coming out, and that will make very big headlines, won't they? Kersey comes out, and what's that mean? And I talked to actually my direct boss, who's the dean of the school that I'm in, and then also talked to actually my provost yesterday about that I was going to be on this podcast, and so Corbin University is where we're at. So he said, mention the name. And it was, to me, it was a little bit of explaining maybe certain things like the research that I haven't been doing, the writing the publishing that hasn't been happening. And I think part of it can be attributed to the fact that I've got a million great ideas. I've got 400 outlines that I put together. I've done a ton of research, but just nothing has come together. And so part of it was just sharing that, like saying, I think that I'm getting closer to getting this under control, that I will be able to contribute more to the academy from our department, from our school.
And what was his, let me ask two questions. What sparked the conversation? And then what was his response?
He was, very supportive. And I think part of it was just looking back, and that within academics, there are expectations that you are doing outside the classroom, you are publishing, you're doing those sorts of things. And maybe it was more of an internal thing that I was recognizing that I really hadn't done a whole lot. I've spoken at a couple of conferences, done a few things here and there, and just realizing I want to do more in that area. I haven't been doing more in that area. Why not? And so part of it was to tell him to even hold me accountable. It's like, I think I've got the tools to be more productive. In the classroom, I think I'm doing fine. I'm doing great. But I would like, there are books that I have inside of here that I'd like to do.
I can so relate to that, Kent.
Yeah. And I do feel now that I can do this. And part of it too, talking to my provost, he shared stories about people that he knows who have recently been diagnosed and was very supportive. And so, yeah, I think it'll be interesting. And I've talked to some students. I talked to the guy who runs our student support and told him, hey, I'd love to help or talk to students who need help, that sort of thing. It was really interesting. It was like not even 10 minutes later, a student came to my door and it's like, hey, I've got something going on.
That's awesome.
Like, wow, I just told him like 10 minutes ago. And so I've had, a few conversations. Like, I'm not a professional. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a licensed coach or anything, but here are things that I've done that have worked for me and would suggest incorporating them into your schedules.
Kent, and one of the things that you said too, I really want to highlight, and that's the difference between people, using ADHD as as an excuse versus an explanation. You shared with your boss, here's what's been going on, but you didn't say, okay, well, can you help me? Like, you explained the challenge that you were having. You explained why you believe you're having it, and you explained what you are trying to do right now that is going to help resolve this problem that you're having. And that is taking accountability. That is an explanation. It is by no means using as an excuse. And Kent, well executed.
Yeah, and I remember because it took a while to figure that. I talked to my wife, and there's a good friend I have here I've talked to, and I'm like, do I talk to him about it? And because I know that's really tricky, depending on your job and your relationship with your boss and your supervisor. Sometimes it's not always safe to share a lot of information. You've got to be really careful. And if it was a different situation, I might not have, but my boss is awesome. And really the support at this school is, it's like, hey, everybody, is going through different journeys, and this is just the one you're on. So that's great.
So here's a question that I'm kind of wondering about. Do you think that some of the support you received, was contextual in the sense that, so you are a teacher in a field, I'm coming from using the right word, theologic institution?
Theology. Yeah, it's a Christian university. We have a Baptist background. We're not really technically a Baptist school right now, but it is.
So you're using Baptist in quotes.
Well, yeah, that's a whole other story. But yeah, it is basically a Christian liberal arts college. So our biggest majors are actually education and business. And, we have psychology, right? So it's basically all the liberal arts. And, so, yeah.
So you felt there's more compassion.
It really is. The academic world is very interesting because there are some institutions, a lot of research institutions that are very competitive, and it maybe wouldn't be safe to share that kind of thing because you are, it's dog eat dog, basically, who can get published in the most prestigious ways. Those are the ones who get advanced. But there really is a great ethos here of grace being shown to people. And so knowing that, I felt safe to be able to, I really feel like I could go to my supervisor and share just about anything, because they are very, very gracious in so many ways.
And how is he done in the realm of respecting that information that you shared with him? Because I've heard of situations where someone would share and then their boss liberty to share it with everybody else.
Yeah. I trust that he's actually a pastor. He does teaching and pastoring both together, and so he knows how to keep confidential information confidential. And the fact that when I talked to the provost the other day, he had no idea what was happening. So yeah, I think they respect very much that this information stay. Like I control who hears it and who doesn't, basically.
Okay. Well, what has been your most surprising reaction that you've gotten so far to with anyone that you've shared your ADHD with?
It probably was actually my doctor when after I got the diagnosis. He's a great doctor. I respect him. I like him a ton, and he really is a great doctor. But when I got the official diagnosis from the psychologist saying, yeah, here, so 10-page report, detailing everything and saying, the doctor saying, yeah, I would recommend medication, those sorts of things. And he was, when I had that conversation with him, I said, well, here's what he said. Where do we go next? And he was like, hey, okay, you're a professor at a university. You're not like a college, a student who's flunking out of community college for the 15th time. You've been successful, you've been promoted. You basically, professionally, you're way above anybody else who I've seen with this issue. Do you really want to change anything? And we had a little push back and forth where, I said, so I'm getting the vibe you don't want to, prescribe anything. He goes, no, I'll do whatever you want to do, but I want you to really think twice before you change anything. And it was great because he said, you need to have some benchmark. It's not just how you feel, but you need to have some objective type data, like you try grading, but you can only do 2 papers, but now you can grade 20 papers. That's an objective standard that you can measure. Right. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so, it actually got more pushback from him than I expected, but I think it was good. It was well thought out. It's like, don't just start taking pills to feel better. You need to have some idea of what this is going to do for you. And so, but most people are, very understanding. And, but I think there's still that myth out there. In fact, I watched one of your earlier blabs where people are saying, it's a myth, where it's not a real thing. And, my wife teaches at a public school. She's been teaching for like 30 years. And so, there's so many kids she works with who, it seems like, is this an epidemic? Is it, when we were a kid, we just we just didn't behave very well, but now they're giving pills to kids. And so it seems like in elementary school, especially, this is very tricky waters to navigate.
And you're talking about the education level, you're successful. How could you have ADHD? And the episode, I think episode 85, the one that was released this week, that one we're talking, I'm not sure when this one will be released on the podcast.
When you listen to it.
Right, exactly. We were actually discussing about this idea of having twice exceptionality. We had, so I have a master's degree. We had one person who just got their PhD in neuroscience. We had an attorney, and I think it's 4. We had all the people that were in the conversation were all highly educated people who all had ADHD. And so it's like, yes, you can be successful and be struggling. There's nowhere where it says if you achieve this level of academic success, that's a disqualifier for ADHD.
You've overcome. Yeah, you've been cured or something. Yeah,
right. And if for anyone out there who is listening, who might be a clinician who is kind of interested in this, if you are working with someone who is in college or is in advanced levels of school, ask about, well, what was that like for you to get through that? Because you're going to get a very different story than just seeing what they got on paper. And that's, when I am doing a diagnostic process, I'm way more interested in the stories than I am scales.
Yeah.
Because I think that is really where we get a lot more really good information. And, my training is all about taking data and really looking at that. And it's interesting because I don't move away from the data, but I have a more inclusive of story as data.
It's hidden data, right? It's hidden in the narrative, right?
Yes. And I think that we miss a lot of people that could really, who really need the help because we're just looking at numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing that I realized is that when I look back at like my grade reports when I was in elementary school, and it was a classic, doesn't pay attention, could do really well. And like my GPA in high school was not very good. My GPA in college was okay. My master's was really good. My PhD was like 4 point. And I realized what was happening was I was focusing on things that interested me.
Yep, that's it.
And, and so what I tell students is try to find something in a class that interests you, because especially if you have ADD, the word important just doesn't exist. Important doesn't mean anything. Only interesting is what is going to register with us. And so you got to figure out, how am I going to make this interesting? And sometimes it's a game internally you have to play in your head, I think.
And I remember when I was in college, I would often renegotiate my assignments to kind of tweak it towards my area of interest. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to open up the seats. So if anyone wants to hop in and ask you or I a question, or if someone wants to just post questions in the chat here. So as we're waiting for that,
So are you excited about New Orleans? Have you been to New Orleans before?
I've never been to New Orleans.
So cool.
I am excited, and it's interesting too because I've been doing some work on some of the national subcommittees that I keep getting like added to these like panels and leadership training things that they want me doing. I'm like, oh, okay, sure. Oh, and then I was like, what am I doing?
I want to go look around. Yeah, that's the problem with some of those conferences is you go to a city, but you are in the hotel the whole time. You don't really get a chance to.
Right.
But you need to go to the French Quarter and get beignets. Have you heard about that?
Someone was telling me about that.
Yeah, like deep fried donuts, just caked in powdered sugar. So it's probably the worst thing in the world for you, but it's delicious. So good. I mean, they're like freshly made there, and it's so good. Yeah.
Now, if I go on a junk food binge tonight, I'm going to blame you because you planted that seed in my brain.
Yeah, blame it on me. That's fine. Yeah. So,
it's funny. I think a while back, I was on my podcast. I was talking about sharing some kind of accountability for myself for some weight loss goals that I have. And usually, when I share something like that, and then you don't hear from me for a while about that, there's two explanations. One, I don't want to talk about it because I'm not doing so well with it. Or the others, I just forgot that I did that. So I do want to say, because I think it was, I don't know, 6-7 months ago where I talked about how I had gained some weight and I want to lose weight and I was kind of struggling with it. So I want to use this chance while we were waiting for someone to take a seat here so that I am just almost at my goal, and I'm almost seeing a 1 on the scale. I'm very, very close.
Sweet.
So this morning I was 200.5. At some point this year, I was
beignets,
like,
you shouldn't be talking about beignets then.
I was like 223 at some point this year. And I feel really good about that.
But isn't that one of those things like weight loss is, it seems like one of the things like Dave Ramsey talks about financially is you can do whatever you want, but you can't do everything you want. And I think like with ADD, for a project, you can do whatever you want, but you can't do everything. You can do anything, but not everything. And so like you can't really lose 20 pounds. You can lose an ounce. All you can do today is like, okay, I won't have that big box of Oreos and eat the whole thing, or I will park a lot longer. That's what I end up doing is I try to park as far away as I can. And so I can control that, but I really can't control whatever's on the scale, and now I'm being a therapist. There you go. But
the tables have turned.
Yes. And so, to me, that it really helps. Like I can't lose 20 pounds. So maybe I can not eat a cookie. I can do a little bit of exercise, but ultimately that's a reflection of something that is a little bit beyond my control. It's just how much gravity you're pulling down on the earth. And so, yeah. You can have a beignet. I will. Yes, that will. Well, you can have one.
Do beignet and beers go together? Because it's.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's Louisiana, so open drinking. Yeah, the French Quarter is pretty crazy. So yeah. And
I don't even know if I'm going to really do much sightseeing there because these conferences.
Yeah.
So it's pronounced beignet.
Yeah, I don't even know what I said.
Beignet.
Yeah, but I think she did spell it up there. Yeah, BEIGNETS. Yeah, and they have the really good cafe.
I want to get some big nets
too. Yes, the food is so good there. Oh my goodness! Wow,
that's what I have heard.
Yeah.
All right, so it looks like we have no takers on asking any questions, which is absolutely fine. And maybe people are using some good impulse control. I think that I've had people come on the pod in these blabs. They go, I wasn't planning on joining, and then they like share everything personal in their entire life. So that's why
this format. I think it's really interesting, but it's also the middle of the little bit of Wild West, isn't it? It's like you don't really know. And what you handled the one a while ago who said ADD was a myth or something. I thought you handled that so well, level-headed. You just very thoughtful in what you said, and I really appreciated that a lot.
I always look at those as opportunities for learning, and when I see someone who is going into a post and saying ADHD isn't real, it's like, okay, this is a person who's either hurting or is dealing with some denial, and either way probably actually just needs a hug and a little bit of information. You know, so that's how I tried to respond to them. And then after a while, after it was clear that I'm being compassionate with this person and they continue, that's when I say, okay, now you are blocked from the room.
Yeah. There's some people, extra grace required, who no matter what you do, they're just not going to get it, and you just move on. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, here's what we're going to do. I always say trolls will be trolls.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. Except where's the hair? If they're going to be a troll, at least have fun hair.
Yeah, like green poking out or something like that.
I used to love. I would like fidget with them and turn them into knots and.
Yes, those are awesome.
And I may have lit a couple on fire. I wasn't diagnosed back then, so I may have done some things that kids don't try this at home.
Yeah, we just throw rocks at each other. When we were kids, like, what are you thinking? It's like, I don't know, just his head was there, throw a rock at it. So.
I'm going to tell you a funny story, Kent, all about that. So I think I was in 6th grade. I was at overnight camp, and this overnight camp that I was at, this is the second year I was there. The first year I did a week. The second one I did 4 weeks. And the second year on my 4th week, the camp asked me to not come back. And one of the things that had happened was like the straw that broke the camel's back was that I got in this like rock and berry fight with my bunkmate. So, but it's fun. To me, it's funny because then in high school, I met him through a youth group that I was involved in, and we actually became like best friends in high school. The kid that I almost got kicked out of camp for.
Wow, the bonding, yeah. That's how guys bond, right? You just throw stuff at each other. Yeah,
do stupid stuff, and then we bond about what the heck were we thinking?
It's crazy when we survive. I look back at some of the stuff, and how did I live through that?
It's. I mean, you say that too, and I think about our kind of modern parenting, almost epidemic, where it's like we're like wrapping our kids in bubble wrap because we're so concerned about like them getting hurt.
We were in the station wagon rolling around in the back, going down the freeway. It was just rattling around. Nobody cared. We survived, I guess.
No, I'm sitting in the front seat while mom's chain smoking and nobody's buckled up and
yeah, we made it.
That never happened.
Yeah, at least those cars were made out of like cast iron, though, right? If you couldn't even dent them if you tried,
So, Kent, as I mentioned at the very beginning, I need to give my brain a break because I have a 90-minute meeting coming up.
Sounds good.
So do me a favor. Tell people who are here live and podcast listeners where they can reach out to you and if they want to connect with you, ask you any questions or anything of the sort. So email address and stuff like that, whatever you feel comfortable with sharing.
Yeah, probably the best place is through Twitter. My Twitter handle is all one word, Dead Theologians, which sounds really morbid, but it's a play on the Dead Poets Society, which is one of my favorite movies. And so, hey, why not have a Dead Theologian Society? So all one word, Dead Theologians. So yeah, I probably need to get something different, but it's memorable.
It certainly is that. Unlike something like Kent, Matt.
Yeah, that's boring. Yeah, I actually did have a Twitter that was Kent Kersey, but it was one of the first, and I think it was some settings were just really strange. So it's like I got to try a new one, and so it seems to work. Yeah, so follow me there. I'd love to talk.
Well, Kent, thank you so much for sharing your story and for coming on ADHD Rewired, and we will be in touch at a future point. So thank you.
I really appreciate talking to you. I love your podcast. You are doing great work, and keep it up.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to another episode of ADHD Rewired. And if you're new to the show, welcome to ADHD Rewired. We are more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. You can see a full outline of this and all other episodes with all the links and other resources mentioned during this interview at ADHDrewired.com. Help support this podcast by checking out my sponsors. I use Zoom video conferencing nearly every day, and so can you. Go free or go pro. But please, go to erictivers.com/Zoom so they know that I sent you. And you can get a free audiobook from Audible at erictivers.com/Audible. And next time you shop Amazon, use the Amazon search portal at ADHDrewired.com. A small percentage of your purchase will go to support this show, and it doesn't cost you anything extra. You can also support this podcast by leaving an honest rating and review in iTunes or Stitcher. This really helps other people find this show. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Don't just be a passive listener, be an active member of the ADHD Rewired community. We are on Facebook. You can like our page, but please submit your request to join our free and growing community. And don't forget to check your other inbox because I screen everybody before they come into our community.
Looking for a coach? If you're still listening at this point and you answered yes, come to my website at ADHDrewired.com and schedule your free 20-minute consultation, or call me at 224-993-9450. Is your school, business, or organization hiring speakers? I provide fun and engaging presentations full of practical solutions that both educate and entertain. Hire me for your next professional development day or corporate training event. Go to ADHDrewired.com/talks. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.